of our meeting on November the 19th, before Thanksgiving. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, so moved, yeah.
Second. Peter Morrison, seconded.
I second.
Terry. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Very good. So, we're next to desktops. Desktops.
Yes.
Systems.
I'm requesting $50,000
Yes.
for next fiscal year to purchase PCs. Basically, the PCs are used to replace obsolete ones or any PCs that fail. And we try to rotate them frequently so they don't go over 4 or 5 years old.
Mm-hmm. Where do the old ones go?
If they're not, sometimes we redeploy them if we can.
Yeah.
If we can't, we take the hard drives out. We hire a company to shred them, and then we dispose of them through the DPW. They're old. Usually
Nobody
they're like,
wants an old computer, right?
well, they're 5 to 6 years old sometimes when we get rid of them. And they're not worth using.
Yeah, I think that's why mine keeps locking up. It's probably
Yeah, they get
like
really
me,
slow.
old.
You have to
Yeah.
remember that it's not the physical PC, it's the software inside of it that you are buying.
And the memory is just,
Memory.
memory usage is
Mhm.
tremendous now.
Just a
So
box
old
that holds
computers
the software.
don't have the capacity for the latest
Yeah,
goo gaws that they put in there you never use. But
yeah.
so this is a continuing.
Every other year, I ask for 50. And it gets us through the 2 years, pretty much.
Well, you've done a great job of that. So it doesn't hurt. I haven't heard any complaints. We heard, you must be hear complaints, but
We do hear complaints.
What about?
my computer.
Yeah, it's
Do you want to
slow.
go on to the next 10 years, or the next 9 years to say, is there anything new, different that's coming down the pike?
Basically, there are 3 major items that I asked for besides the desktops. One is network infrastructure, and what
Yes.
that money is used for is to upgrade cabling in the buildings, racks which house servers and switches. It's also used to upgrade our switches, which are in all the different buildings, communication equipment, that type of thing. One of the things that we really want to do is replace the rack in the town building. It's really a mess. It was put in many, many years ago. The cabling's really old, and we can't even get into the rack to even do anything. It's pretty bad there. Yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah.
I've seen that, not
Yeah.
at your place, but
Yeah.
other places.
So that's what the network infrastructure
Well, that's
is.
important. What happened to Detroit, we don't want to happen here, right? The infrastructure eroding and not being, because
Yeah.
Peter and I were just talking that without computers, everybody kind of should go home.
Right, you
It
can't
just
work.
can't exist anymore. So
Exactly.
it's really crucial.
And then servers, we ask for money almost every other year to replace old servers, and we rotate them through. And we're doing pretty good on that. We're replacing 8 servers this year. We've purchased 4 so far. We're in the process of implementing those, and then later in the year we'll buy the next 4. And then the next year we'll ask for more to replace. We rotate them through.
Are there changes in the manufacturers? A lot of the hardware business is changing?
A little bit, yeah. We go through Dell, and we have a good rep, and we sit down with them, and we go through all the technical specs, and they ask questions about our requirements, and then they just, design to order the servers.
Yeah.
The next one is GIS. GIS, as you know, we're working on the new images right now, and the images are finished, and they've just gone through a quality review. They're going to be uploaded to the website probably by the end of the year. And then we ask for money to replace the images about every 4 years or so.
4 years,
Yeah. So that was a big project. That took a while.
How's that, the last time I remember we had any amount of discussion on that, there was a fairly significant upgrade as far as the quality level.
Yes.
And I just wondered how, I kind of lost track of how that ended up.
The quality is going to be much better. You can zoom in a lot further.
Yeah.
I don't remember the parameters, but it's like 6 inches to something. I'm not sure. But you're going to be able to see much more details. It's going to look a lot better on the website.
So has it been noticeable by people?
Yes.
I mean,
Nathan's working on it now. He says it's much more noticeable. Big difference.
I have one question about going forward with this, which I assume is, would you say, every 4 or 5 years?
No, I never got a sheet on it.
Have you looked into any potential partnering of funding with some federal agency that has a stake in having that imagery for things like coastal erosion, or I'm thinking of every agency that's dealing with public safety that might say, you know, we really need to have this, but we don't need to have it until 5 years from now, and somehow you can split the cost with some agency.
I know the state just did their own imagery. I think they did most of Massachusetts. Unfortunately, it's not as clear as ours.
So there's a
So
quality.
we're going to continue to use ours, but we do have to use some of their data. Parcel location ID is a big thing that they're changing right now. So we're sort of converting over to that, but we want to keep our images.
Right.
So it depends.
I didn't see they have a sheet on the GIS. How much money was that?
It's about $300,000, and that includes
This is that for 2015?
About 18.
18.
18.
Yeah.
She was
Good. All right.
good
That
to
makes
ask her to remark on that.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, that includes the flyover. That also includes updating all the data layers,
Mhm.
which is a manual process.
Do they expect that, at that point in time, do you expect to have a further enhancement of it?
Probably. It seems to get better every
Yeah,
time we do
it
it.
does. I just wondered how the technology was moving on that.
Yeah. I think we have infrared now or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
My guess is every cycle is probably going to be a dramatic improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Dramatic
when
change in technology.
the original was pretty crude.
Mhm. Yeah, it was
I mean,
old.
certainly based on what we're doing
Yeah.
now, so.
To people, you can't use them for property lines. You have to get a surveyor for that.
Yes,
part, right?
yeah.
Well,
So I can't blame that on having to move the show off the property.
No,
right?
Nathan does a pretty good job, but it's not legal. I mean, you can see where your property line is, but I wouldn't use that
yeah.
if you're pursuing anything legally.
It's pretty close, though. I mean, I've actually used it to at least get an idea of where things were.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then- But it's not legal, I know, yeah.
Right.
Depends on where the property, where you start. Focus Road, where
Mhm.
your land starts and where the town's.
Yeah.
Pretty hairy.
I had one question. Is there anything moving into the future that we need to be aware of as far as like security goes for the town, like upgrading our security to higher levels so that just
What we would like to do, there's tools out there that we haven't really purchased yet that will monitor access to the network, so you'll get alerts, but we don't have that. Yeah, that would be something nice to have.
Is that
Definitely.
something like other, kind of, with see Nantucket as becoming a larger town have, or?
Not, actually, we're quite ahead of other towns,
Okay.
except for maybe the big cities.
Right.
We do have virus protection, automatic virus protection. We have firewalls in all of the buildings, so we do have a lot of protection in place. But one thing we don't have is alerts. Like if something goes down, we don't have an alert. So sometimes if something goes down, someone calls something's wrong,
Right.
and it's a crisis situation. So
Right.
that would be something really nice to have.
So
Hopefully in the
maybe-
future,
maybe in the future.
yeah.
Another expensive infrastructure kind of item is.
They
cameras.
are expensive, depending on what you get.
You know, cameras for building and intrusions.
I
and-
don't have that. I know
on?
the police has that here,
Yes.
that they take care
For
of.
this building?
Yes. And I know that Island Home has it,
Mhm.
and I think Marine has it too. But not all the buildings have cameras.
It's getting more into a computer, there's a lot of hacking going on.
Yeah,
No, I know, but I was thinking cameras can get cameras and, I know
Mhm.
at the bank, we can sit there and
Oh,
look
yeah,
at
with the bank, yeah.
all the different people
Yeah.
that come and go.
You read a lot today about hacking and so
Mhm.
forth. The news yesterday was pretty interesting, about North Korea and so forth. But
Yeah, it's scary when you think about it.
well, when you think about it, it is. Except that I don't know why anybody would want to hack into Nantucket's computer. But having said that, there are probably other priorities. That's what I'd be getting at. But still, it makes you a little concerned because if somebody wants to, apparently, it's doable. I think that's the way to.
Right, and we have web filtering in place too, which prevents people from going to sites that they shouldn't be going to and then clicking on something, which will download and install something. So we do have that in place as well. So we have a lot of different tools in place that help to protect the network and the
Okay.
PCs.
You were saying, that why would anybody want to hack? But I would think there's a lot of personal data on, for example, real estate, tax collection,
Right.
Social Security numbers, probably all over the place.
Yeah.
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 No, because the only thing that used to have Social Security numbers attached to it was excise tax, but since the state changed to the S before the, property tax bills and all that is by parcel and ID. It's, so,
My social security numbers are still on the server.
well, if they're on the server,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't, but they're not on the tax bills or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
On the servers, they are.
they'd go right for,
They would go,
for
yeah.
her.
Yeah.
So that's something to be on the guard. I'm
Exactly.
sure you are. You probably go to
Yeah, we have
seminars
everything
all
locked
the
down.
time
All the
about it.
servers are locked down, all the PCs are locked down. People can't install anything without coming through IT.
Good.
I've noticed that the website's very slow. Is there a reason for
There,
that?
it can be very slow.
Yeah.
I think Civic Plus, who's the vendor, sometimes they have issues with the server.
Yeah.
And it is in Kansas, I believe. Kansas.
Oh, that's okay. then.
Yeah, it's hosted at their site, but it does take a while for the internet, if you have a slow internet
Yeah,
connection.
no, I mean, it gets frustrating. I was trying to show somebody,
It is slow.
something, like even an agenda for the Board of Selectmen, what was going to be on
Takes a
tonight,
while.
et cetera. It's just, to the point where they think, well, maybe it's not responding. They start clicking away, and it's like, no, they just hold on, wait, but it's very slow.
Yeah, we can touch base with them and see what's going on.
Yeah.
See if they can improve it.
They're responsive, those people in Kansas. I'm from Kansas.
No, you're not, are you?
Olathe.
Olathe.
Where's this outfit? Because Olathe and
I
Overland
don't
Park are the
remember
two
what
biggest.
the town is, I don't know.
Well, I think you should have called her.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey, buddy.
You have it in to them.
I kind of lost my Kansas twang.
I don't know whether it's me, but I find early in the morning it goes pretty good.
And then later in the day, it slows down.
Ooh, afternoon is, forget
Yeah.
about it.
Maybe
You wanna-
that's what it is.
You want to get in there in the afternoon, it's a dogfight. No.
Yeah.
Early in the morning, it's pretty good though.
Very good. Do you have any other questions from the
I
committee?
don't think so.
Peter,
I have
Efron?
a question. Peter McEachran, how are you?
Good.
8 servers, where are they physically?
Where are they physically? The ones that we're redoing next year or the ones we're doing now?
In general?
In general? Oh, we have many of the servers here in this building in the data center. And then we have one at the Island Home, we have one at the DPW, we have one at the Council on Aging. And I think that's it.
Okay.
We have like 26 or so servers.
You have redundancy on backups and,
Yes, we're using Barracuda to back up,
Yeah.
so it's off-site in the cloud. So we have an appliance here, so the data all gets backed up to the appliance on-site, and then it gets uploaded to their servers.
and you do all your IT in-house, go
Most
outside
of
for
it,
any
we do
hardware or
go out,
software?
we do go out sometimes for consulting work. For instance, we went to a new email system about a month ago, so we hired someone to do that. Sometimes we hire consultants to do network work, which we hire engineers because it's very complicated sometimes. But other than that, we support all the PCs, all the hardware, software.
What about the phone lines and the phone lines?
That's supported through the police department, Jen.
So it's voice over IP?
It's voice over IP, yeah. We do support the infrastructure for the voice over IP, like the switches and all of that. Jen supports the phones and the server.
Great. Thank you.
What's your biggest headache,
My biggest headache,
if you had any at all? It sounds like everything's
No,
running
it's-
so smoothly that you really don't
no,
have
it's
any.
not smooth. It is mostly the help desk, I guess, because there's always something coming in that's broken. Equipment breaks or printers break, or this is not
Passwords.
working, password resets. It just comes in all the time.
Mhm.
So it's difficult sometimes for us to get the large projects finished, because the help desk takes precedence usually.
And
help
you have a
desk
small
calls.
staff, I would assume. So is the help desk covered by one of you? as
Yeah,
opposed
it's
to-
myself and 2 other technicians,
Uh-huh.
and then I have another dedicated person that's working on e-permitting, and then another person that works GIS. So pretty much it's just 3 of us handling
Mhm.
all of the network and PCs.
How many users?
About 150 or so, or 140 PCs, but we support Munis too. The financial application,
Yeah,
Munis,
Munis.
and the airport uses that, the school uses that, so we get involved with that. So I would say that's my biggest complaint.
That's a,
One more. Do you manage the servers for the town clerk as well?
Yes.
And is all her information backed up as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Someone was concerned on another committee if it wasn't. I said, of course it is.
Yeah, it is. In fact, they're going to be going to the CPC to ask for a replacement of the 2 servers that she has
Yeah.
Yeah.
for next year. So hopefully that will go through.
No, I
Didn't
didn't.
go through.
What's that?
Didn't go through.
It didn't go through? Okay, so that's going to add another year to the servers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't include that in my capital request.
Yeah.
We don't, yeah, that's good.
It's going to add
I mean,
another year.
that's interesting.
Well,
It's about 4 years old now, I
wait till you
think.
see the town warrants, you'll catch on.
Yeah. Well, just out of curiosity, why wouldn't that fall under your purview?
The servers? Originally, when the servers were purchased for the town clerk's office, it was specifically for their document management system called Laserfish, so it does all of they scan all their historical records onto the server. So she went through the CPC, because it's historical records, to get the funding, and that was about 3 or 4 years ago. So she's going to try to get the money again to replace them through CPC. If it doesn't go through, which apparently it didn't, we're either going to have to go another year and ask again, or I'll have to put it in my budget for next year. I mean, if I have money left over for the servers I'm doing, I could maybe buy them, but I'd have to wait and see.
So at this point, we're talking 2017, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just a lot of important stuff on
Yeah,
the CPCs.
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'm just pointing out.
Yeah, we're going to have to probably do
How is that
something.
going to work for you, for the clerk?
We can probably go another year. I have $75,000 that we got last year for servers. After we put in the 8 servers that we plan for, we can see how much money, if we have any left, and maybe we can hopefully have
Talk
enough
to
to
Dell,
buy
right?
another server.
Dell, about a quantity discount. Can I get 9 for the price of 8?
Sometimes, but not usually. But we'll have to keep that in mind.
I assume that pushing a server for another year translates into basically increased calls to the help desk.
Around us.
Yeah, sometimes hardware
Goes around
breaks.
everybody.
We've
I mean,
had
it's
hard drives
like-
go.
She's got a warrant.
Yeah.
But we use the warranties. The warranties expire usually after 3 years.
Right.
But for servers, we extend them. So it gets costly
I
every
get you.
year because we pay extra.
So it
For support.
translates into basically buying a warranty for another year.
Right, yeah, in case something
Which you could
happens.
avert, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the water company PCs are really old. They're probably going on 7 years old. And we're replacing them now, so they're pretty old. And they've gone down. The hard drives have gone down.
Any more questions? Cool.
Good.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Sounds like
Thank you.
a wonderful job.
Does your son know as much as you do about computers?
No, he doesn't really do much with computers.
Oh, he doesn't?
No, well, he does, but he's not into like the hardware or anything
Yeah,
like that.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a great thank you.
All
I
right.
was going to say, it's kind of like, well, if
Enjoy
the parent
this
knows
video.
about it, then the kids won't be interested. But the parents are dumb about it.
My laptop's
Gonna
working.
show
Let me
them.
ask Mom.
Well, that's right. He's in engineering school. and that would, they're very heavily on computer applications in engineering school.
Well, the next item is future topics, and as you know, we got we're going to present to the FinCom in a couple of weeks. And we've got a bunch of material yesterday afternoon, so you could look at it over dinner. So anyway, I really would like to go over that and see what you think of where things stand, and point out where things might have changed a little bit, just so that we could figure out how to fund it. So,
You know,
John?
yeah. Libby, I did a little bit of pencil scratching on this, and by moving the Consul Springs project, it looks to me like you're in real good shape to handle everything except the school and the fire department from either other funding sources, general fund, 700,000 from general fund and free cash. It just looks like you're in pretty good shape there. Is that,
Yep,
am I reading that okay?
yep, you are. Do you want me to take you through what changed since last time?
Great,
Sure.
that would be
I think
wonderful.
that'd be a good
Thank you.
idea.
So, does everybody have this sheet? And I'm very sorry it came to you so late yesterday. It was,
Oh, yeah.
There was a holiday there.
there was a holiday there, and we're concurrently getting our budget presentation ready for the Board of Selectmen's meeting tonight. If anybody's interested in that, please come to that. So, on the first page, the title of this is Town Admin Recommendations for Fiscal 16 Capital Project Request for the Board of Selectmen 10/1/14, updated as of 12/2/14.
Right.
I tried to either bold or show in some manner what changed. So Consu Springs is stricken, but I left the actual total in the, and I'll show you that in a second, just so that we could see how it looks with and without it.
Okay.
With regard to Consu Springs, we're having a little bit of trouble with the vendor giving us the detailed plan that you all wanted to see, which you should see, to outline exactly what we would do for $3.5 million,
Yeah.
because there's a contract issue with him. His contract expired, he has some unpaid bills that can't be paid because it's in prior fiscal year, so he's disgruntled, I would say, at the moment, and we need to figure that out, but we're not gonna get it figured out right now. So, I think we're gonna have to put it off. I don't think too much else changed on.
Will anybody ask any questions about, what's the impact of that? Is it, back up the storm drains or?
It's not,
We can get by.
It's a good environmental thing to do, and I don't think we want to leave it undone for
Yeah.
very much longer. It involves the duck pond and the harbor outfall, and we want to get it properly.
I think we want to get it done. I think we want to do it right. It's
We
very,
want to do it
it's very
right,
sensitive in
and we
there.
want to understand what $3.5 million is.
Yeah, that's,
Give us.
see, that's
A lot
the
of
key,
money.
It's
that's
a lot of money.
a lot of money.
It's been in at that number for a while now. We have changed vendors, I think, somewhere in the midst of this. So we need a clearer picture of the whole thing.
Libby, on that, is there a group or an organization we'd send that to kind of flush it out a little bit more so we could see or encourage that to happen, or?
Other than the vendor, I don't know.
Yeah,
So page 2, I took out the first two items down to 0. Prospect Street sidewalk,
Yep.
that was, I think, 380.
Yep.
And then the Sparks Ave sidewalk improvements was, I think, 95.
Right.
So regarding Prospect Street, what the thought process was there is we still have a capital project that hasn't concluded yet involving the Prospect Street
Right.
bike path
Yep.
that goes up and behind over to Joy Street.
Yep.
And I guess I was thinking we could put this part off until that is done. I did also ask the police chief for stats on accidents at that site, 0. So it is a tricky looking spot, and I'm not going to say it's not a safety issue, but there haven't been actually any accidents, at least reported. So I thought that could wait. Sparks Ave sidewalk improvements, that's a nice to have. It was already a tier 2 that we should do at some point, but it's a nice to have, but we could put it off. Going down, I think
that's about it.
that was it.
Yeah.
So going to the bottom of that page, the total of all the items, including Consu, is $64,925.
Yeah.
If we take out school, fire, and Consu, we're down to 6.4. We increased a little bit our proceeds from real estate sales. The proceeds from real estate sales account, as I think I've mentioned before, it has about $8 million in it right now, but it is restricted to how it's used. It has to be, first of all, used to pay off whatever debt was incurred with regard to the property that was sold. And then it can be used for almost whatever you want, but it has to be items that you can borrow for in accordance with Mass General Law.
For a period of longer than 5 years.
For a period longer than 5 years.
Mooney Building be in that group?
Pardon me?
Yes.
Would that be
The
the
proceeds
biggest?
from the Mooney Building is in that.
Yeah.
Yep. There are a number of.
And eventually, fire station.
Yes,
property, if
that's
that-
right. Now.
Can't count on it right now, but.
So what I haven't done is, specifically applied what projects the 3 million is going to go to. This is just the bigger picture right now. Prior year capital article appropriations, 380. That was a little higher last week, I think, but it turned out that one of the departments that wasn't quite paying attention to the list that Martin sent out 5 times realized that they actually couldn't get some of their project money reappropriated, so we had to put it down a little bit, but only by like $20,000.
Libby, how much was in that real estate?
About 8 million.
About 8?
Yep.
But it is restricted, you said.
It's somewhat restricted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, is that a separate, from an accounting point of view, that's a separate account?
Separate
Yes.
account.
Okay. How do you
It does
show it?
not go into the general fund.
Excuse me?
It's not part of the general fund. It's a special, it's a specific account.
It's like a reserve account almost.
Well,
Yeah,
sort of.
it's what it's called, its true name is what's known as a receipt reserve for appropriation account, okay? It requires town meeting authorization to spend the money, so it comes in, and we
Okay.
have to actually get town meeting authorization to
Okay.
actually expend the funds. And it has limitations on what it, obviously, as Libby said, can only be spent on projects that we could
Okay.
borrow for a period of 5 years. It's actually shown under the special revenue funds. It's not part of the general fund per se.
If it was reserve, it would require 2/3 vote, so it's probably not a reserve account. To
I don't
John's
remember
point.
if it's 2/3.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it's
You
2/3
said
vote.
approval of town meeting, but it
Right.
would be majority.
Right.
What happens if 5 years goes by and it's still, what happens to it, to the money?
Just continues to sit there until we can convince, until whatever administration exists in
Okay.
5, 10, 15, 20 years can convince the town to use it. It can't be, the only authorizing body for the money is town meeting.
Gotcha.
The 5 years only had to do with, if you want to use it, it has to be for projects you can borrow for 5 or more years. That was only the 5-year thing.
So it's
Right.
it's
No.
really big
It's
money.
for
I
big
got you.
projects.
There's no
Okay.
time limit on using it.
There's no
Correct.
time limit on using it. It just,
Okay.
Good, but also at the same time, you have $8 million just kind of sitting there depreciating every year.
Well, hopefully it's appreciated.
Okay. Well, that's my question,
But it is,
is
there's
it invested?
well, there's interest that's earned on it, but
Yeah, that's
But it
appreciated.
is, you're right, Tobias, it is just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
But I hesitated to use too much more of it because there was some talk about using the Mooney Building proceeds for 20 South Water, so that was about $1.2 million or something like that.
The Mooney Building?
Yeah,
It was 2.2.
2.2, sorry,
No
thank you.
worries, no worries.
So, I mean, we could bump that up a bit, but I hesitated because I wanted the board to weigh in, and I don't want to get too carried away with it. Free cash, that is a number that I backed into to get us to 0 here. I think we had 1.5, but I increased it a tad. Helmut Pond Road Bike Path gift account, I actually hadn't had that in here before, but it is referenced on the prior page, and there's about there's actually more like $140,000 in there, but I say 120 because there might be some little things we still want to use that account for the existing bike path. And then capital from the operating budget is 780. One of the projects is funded from the Waterways Fund, which brings us to fund all of it. Now, obviously, we can play around with this a little bit, but it does seem to cover everything.
Libby?
Yes.
I'm going back to the proceeds from real estate sales.
Yep.
Does it have to go, I'm just wondering if it could be used for fires, in other words, does it have to go to real estate?
No.
Oh,
It could
okay.
go to some of it could go to the fire station. That might be a little bit of an offset. I guess I kind of figured that $15 million is, I'm going to make a wild guess here, $30 on your tax bill, perhaps, a year. So I figured, it seems like,
Yeah, it makes more sense.
just use it for other stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of offset the
Yeah.
bigger things. But it's something to talk about for sure.
Okay.
So,
Libby, is this pretty, are you pretty, the numbers you've got here, is this, in your mind, pretty well set?
I'm pretty comfortable with it. I do want to review it with the selectmen.
Yeah.
So pending that change, pending you all's review, and pending FinCom,
Yeah.
I feel pretty good with it right at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get your,
Pending no big
yeah, your feeling about it.
shifts.
Because sometimes you're dealing with things that you're not quite sure of.
Exactly,
and,
exactly. I think
so-
we're pretty sure about almost all of this.
So of the 5,201,000 of the free cash, you're only talking about in this particular location using 1795.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
I didn't bring my budget book, but our other, just FYI, free cash recommendations will be reviewed with the board tonight. But whatever we don't use for capital and some other miscellaneous things, one-time operating budget projects, I think maybe unpaid bills, I think that might have been it. Whatever the remainder is, I think we're suggesting $2 or $3 million go to either a capital project stabilization fund, which has to be set up, or the regular stabilization fund, but not all the rest of it, and to let some of it fall to free cash from next year. So not use every penny of it.
Yeah.
That's what we did last year.
So before we move on to, I'm sorry, John, did you want to?
Yeah, I want to get that. Is there any movement on this capital?
Well, the
Stabilization.
board talked about it last year, and
Yeah, I
ended
know.
up saying, oh, we don't see there's that much of a difference between the stabilization fund and this special project stabilization fund, but I think there's been a little bit of a shift in the thinking there, and there is a difference between those two types of funds. To the average person, there probably isn't that much of a distinction, but there is a distinction that we could keep putting a little money in something like that every year to pay for 20 South Water, say, or
Whatever.
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we would.
Also, unless the policy around the stabilization fund is changed,
Yeah.
very hard to deal with that.
It is. It's
That's
hard
I used to refer to it as a black hole. I mean, you throw money in it and it stays there.
That's
You're
right.
You're not going to get it out
You're not
because of
gonna
the
get it out
policies,
very easily.
which are very restrictive.
Yeah.
And so I would hope that if we have a capital fund, that those same restrictions just aren't going to be in it. I mean, one of the ones says whatever you use, you have to replenish it the next year.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like, say, why bother?
I know. We need to do a bit of an overhaul of those policies, which
Yep.
was something we talked about last year, but other things got in the way, so we haven't gotten to that yet.
That's great.
And we're above what our policy requires now anyway, so it hasn't.
Oh,
so
you know, we're way ahead of
Yeah.
most communities
Yeah.
in that respect. I mean, we're sitting on a pile there, quite
We-
frankly,
yeah.
and the chance of using it is slim to none.
Some people like that.
Yeah, I know. Just they like to look at the money piling there. You know?
Just want to mention
Silas
quick,
Marner.
the only other kind of outstanding thing is the school. And Brian and I met with the superintendent on Monday about his budget, but also a little bit about the school project. And he keeps trying to use the number 45 million. We keep trying to use the number 40 or less. But I don't know, Peter, if you have an update on the committee, but the committee sounds rather aggressive towards the higher number.
Yeah, the 45 million appeared in, was it last week, the week before's meeting, brought to our attention based on how funding was first thought of, how they were going to obtain it, and now realizing that there's a 6-month delay in the whole project because of what they haven't done, as opposed to what they may have should have done. And that has driven the costs, those 500,000, just an additional design fee to CM the project, which to me doesn't make sense. You just contractually go to the CM and say, hey, we're not going anywhere. Let's not be aggressive on how you get paid. But the 45 million was raised because of the size of the school, the size of the gym, and not to speak out of turn, even some of the people who were providing input were, well, we didn't have enough time to input, now we're being sold the project.
Yeah.
So it was a little unnerving, the last meeting.
Yeah, well, it was kind of unnerving for us too, more than that. Two things. I don't remember what Mr. Cozart said about this, but it seemed like there's a effort possibly to incorporate fields, a field redo, football field and some other fields into this project. And we had thought initially that was going to be separate.
Yeah,
He said it would be separate.
yeah, we didn't.
did.
We
He
didn't.
did, yeah.
We
very
didn't hear
clear.
that in the meeting
We saw some conceptual drawings that were shown.
of a master plan. Correct.
Yeah, okay, so maybe that's just.
I think it's just so that you don't build where you think you're going to do some work and then have to
Okay.
move.
Yeah.
Okay,
The thought process has been well thought out.
Yeah.
good,
It's been
good.
part of
Well,
it.
But we were just trying to.
We mentioned the same thing to him as well, like you shouldn't have those.
Yeah,
Don't let anyone
okay,
see those.
right.
It was all
Those
behind
are
the
the words.
scenes, correct.
Yeah.
One other thing that I don't really know how this is going to pan out, but there are some properties right next to where the proposed elementary school
Yep.
thing would go. And at least one property owner is getting very vocal about the location. It is literally feet from her home or her property line.
Property line, correct.
So, we've also been talking about traffic flow and the roundabout at Bartlett and Surfside, and revisiting the idea of a cut through from either Bacchus Lane or the ice rink parking over to First Way. I have a meeting next week with the superintendent and a bunch of other people to discuss that. And I don't know if the 45 million does or doesn't include any provision for relocating anybody.
It was all, the monies were for on-site redevelopment of
Yeah.
all the infrastructure and roads and parking lots, but nothing exterior of
Okay.
the school.
Okay, so there was when we were talking with him, there was a little talk of, well, should we incorporate that stuff into this? On the one hand, it makes sense from a project standpoint, but from a money standpoint, that might be getting kind of difficult.
Yeah, it's two different pots.
It's two different pots, although maybe some of the real estate proceeds account could help out, but that's not programmed in anywhere yet. And so maybe that's a next year thing, 2016 annual town meeting item.
I know the committee wanted to make sure that we as a collective group were not fouling the waters down the road for anything that was around
Okay,
Columbia Butters.
okay,
To
good.
take in that consideration,
Yeah.
to see if they could correct any problems that exist today with this project,
All
and
right,
not to
good. So-
create new ones.
Yeah, people are definitely cognizant of
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I guess before we move too far away from that, one of the issues is that 40 million for people who haven't been following the process along is going to say, wow, that's a lot of money. 45 would be a lot of money too,
Mhm.
but 40 million is a lot of money. But most of us, including me, don't know how much it costs to build schools. So if the committee could come up with some reasonable, rational, logical, well, gee, the one in Newton cost, blah, blah, blah. This is comparable, or this is Nantucket, we got the Nantucket tax, or whatever. But I just suggest that to the committee.
There was nothing there was no change in size?
No.
Okay. That's, when Mike was here, I have a lot of questions on size and appropriateness of the size, but I thought that was too preliminary at this point to really drill in that. But at some point in time, I think there needs to be a real look at that.
I think that they're aggressive in being very conservative on making sure that it's not bigger than what they need. And when I look at it as a parent and as a taxpayer, I look at, okay, we're building a school that's 3, 4, and 5, 3 grades. In reality, they've gone down the road, do we do a new middle school at the same time? And they said no. So they're trying to put as much as they can in smaller boxes without hurting the program.
Yeah.
So I think that looking at it, they've done a great job on focusing on their needs and looking at the flow of kids throughout the years.
Because you can get all the demographic experts to tell you what that in 10 years it's going to look like this. They really don't know.
Correct.
And so to me, it's always been important. I know in the private sector, we always built our plants for a 3 to 5 max
Yeah.
projection, closer to 3, with the idea that we could expand them. So we build them expandable operations. In other words, we build it the design was made in such a way that if it kept right on going, that we could add to it in a certain way. Now, that takes a little different design approach, but we found that there were several times when we didn't have to after 5 years, and there were other times when we did have to. So on the net was we ended up saving ourselves a lot of money over time by taking a shorter term look, but making sure it was expandable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the one thing that they're cognizant of and making sure they don't broach this trigger is on the middle school, once you spend more than 1/3 of your assessed value on the building over a 3-year time in the Commonwealth, that's where you could trigger double that, go to $80 million, because you'd have to bring that entire middle school up to compliance. And the thing is that that's attached to the high school, so.
Yeah. Are you looking at the
One
total?
building?
Yeah. What are you measuring it by? Yeah.
Is it on the books, there's 2 buildings?
Yeah.
So that's a, you know.
You
that's
could make a
tricky.
good case of that, of being all one building.
You could.
Yeah.
You and I could.
So for the time being, we're going with $40 million.
Unless they come up and say to, you know, who they submit their budget to. I'm not part of the committee, but that's up to the, you know, Michael and his team
Yeah.
to submit that. I know the numbers there and I know what they're talking about and what they're worried about, but part of submission is you gotta submit it.
I think we've got a line
So
of
anybody has
questions here.
responsibility.
I just wanted to follow up just conceptually on the point you made about just, you know, guesstimate that, you know, for the fire station, whatever you said, you had maybe $30 a year on the tax bill. Is that $30 on the tax bill like for 30 years or for 1 year?
For the length of the debt.
For the length of the debt, okay. And will it be possible for Cinder to break it out that way so we could say, we got a fire station, we got a school, and
Yeah.
the impact on your tax bill, the way it's going to be structured is going to be X amount of dollars
Yes,
for year 1,
we
2,
will
3.
be able to do that. I mean, these are just rough numbers right at the moment. The $40 million school on $1 million tax bill is roughly $133,138 per year.
Okay. I just want to, because that's an important way to conceptualize it from a taxpayer
Yeah.
standpoint. When you talk about the fire station, if your number is anywhere within the truthful range, or if the true number is anywhere in that neighborhood, that's going to sound like about what you could expect your property insurance to go up if you didn't have a new fire station.
To tag along on that, working with Cinder, I think what Libby is saying is that if we borrow the whole $15 million or the whole $40 million, then it would have an immediate effect. But the reality is you don't borrow the whole 15 or the whole 40. You borrow pieces of that. And I'd love to see that gradual impact on the taxpayer if we could get that. And maybe we do it by fire station and by school. But I think because I know I'm going to get up there and I'm going to have to talk about, well, that's before smoothing, and then they want us to explain, well, what do you mean by smoothing? And I don't want to get into that conversation if I could avoid it and say, well, we have smoothed it.
Yeah, and I think a couple things. We want to say that what we're presenting right now is the worst case scenario. It only is going to get better with the smoothing and the length of borrowing and all that. And forget about what I said about $30. Just I sort of made that up in my
Sure.
head, but
it's not 3,000. It's
no.
Yeah.
It's under $100.
Yeah. Okay.
But when we were doing the police station, whatever the tax rate impact was to whatever the tax bill impact was, it was roughly what we started saying was it was a cup of coffee per week.
Yeah.
So maybe it was more like $60.
Right.
But we tried to use an analogy like that.
Yeah, that's really what we've got to think of. And you know, the other point I want to make about this, having a benchmark idea in your mind about, you know, what does it cost to build a school these days, and what are other communities spending to build schools, average communities, well-off communities, et cetera. And my guess is, I think Michael made some mention of this. This is what it costs to build a school.
Well, he mentioned the big high school was
Yeah.
170,
And
but
the
that doesn't
import-
compare to what we're doing.
Right. The important thing is that building a school, it's like building a house. What kind of house do you want to have? Do you want to have the cheapest one you can have? Do you want to have a pretty good one?
Mm-hmm.
And another somewhat more subtle concept is how much do you want to spend to build in resilience? And that's what I heard Michael saying. He had thought through a lot of the aspects of the point that John made, and I will reiterate, which is there is no demographic forecast that's going to nail down what the enrollment's going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Things are inherently uncertain, and they're going to shift, particularly on this island. And so resilience becomes something you need to underscore. And if you spend another 10% to build in that flexibility, which I heard Michael talk about, where he said if it turns out that we have this empty space here, we're going to put in, 3 places where there can be community school or something that where the school is more of an institution like, the Athenaeum that says we've got the capacity, the capability as an institution, and good things can happen here in, the extra 100 square feet we have.
Yeah,
I think
It's a hard thing to get across the
he
public.
withdrew his.
Yeah, I think the thing that people have to realize is that the citizens on the island read the newspapers and then listen to TV, and they know that there are schools across the country being shut down. And so that's going to be on their mind for sure. And that's why I think it's something we really need to make sure that it's like you said, with a fair amount of detail, because speaking as a taxpayer, I would say that's a big issue that I have in my mind is that somebody says, well, don't worry about it because in 10 years we're going to have a flatline growth. Well, that's the error that a lot of school districts made, and it didn't come to pass, and they shut down schools. And sometimes some of these shutdowns were like 10 years after they built them. I mean, it's amazing some of the problems they had. So I'm not saying that we have the same situation. I'm just saying people are aware of this, and so I think that's going to be something that if I were them, you're going to be focusing on and saying, do we need this size, and what's the rationale, and what's that based on? How far out will that carry us? And what are
we
the
building it for now? I mean,
Yeah.
are we
A
building it?
lot of it we're building for now. We know that. We can prove that. The question is how much more is there, So.
Very good.
No, I just have a question maybe for Libby and Peter. Do you think Michael Cozart is getting the message that 40 should be the number?
He got that message from us.
I mean,
I don't know
what do you
if he's
think?
getting it from the public. What he sort of described to us was his committee is very aggressive towards the higher number, and his internal staff is as well. He seems to be trying to work it down, but
He's going to have to get on the road to sell this.
yes, he is. You're right. 45 million, 40 seems pretty high.
How do we start with the 30 and get to 40?
Well,
It was a number that was released of what didn't come out of the school committee.
No, we
It was just a
couldn't-
plug.
we did that.
Yeah. It was a
Because
plug.
we
No
needed
one
a
knew
number.
what the number was.
Yeah,
He was
before
give us a
the release
number,
was 40.
but if we're going to do a 10-year plan, we
We plugged
needed
it.
numbers, and we plugged it. And we admitted that, and we told people
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Um,
I've already told
Don't
them.
keep it in your mind, but.
But it's there.
It's there.
And it's already caused.
Well, it's always there, but that's,
And just so you know, I think I've mentioned this before, the Civic League has got scheduled 2 forums in January and February, and my intent in proposing those forums was specifically to provide a venue for 2 people to give a detailed, quote, explanation of just what it is that's being done, why it's being done, with the kind of detail that we've heard here. And I really think that that's necessary, because my experience on the fire station work group was a real eye-opener for me. There's a lot more here than just putting up a building that's called a school or a building that's called a fire station. You're talking about a lot of contingency planning that has to go into what you're thinking about for the future, and recognizing and acknowledging the uncertainties and the things you don't know, the Rumsfeldian stuff. And I've seen that go on for the first time here in these 2 instances, more so than I've ever seen it. And I think if that can get conveyed to the public, and it's going to take something like a Civic League forum to do it, to give the venue for it, and to allow full venting of the questions. I think people will come away with an understanding that's maybe half as deep as mine, and they say, it does make sense, and I understand, and I can see that my $150 a year increase on my tax bill is a wise investment, because it's going to prevent a lot of bad things from happening, and you're not going to come back and say, well, now we need another school 10 years later.
Well, you need to get to the non-voting taxpayer.
Yeah, well, and I hope I'm being overly optimistic, but.
Well, it is a good forum.
I
know Margot.
I would say,
now.
from my perspective, you are, but that's.
I usually am. I mean,
Yeah, you always look at the half full.
As I say, I rarely descend below the 30,000-foot level, but I have confidence in the big picture.
I'm going to ask for a vote, actually, because I really want your buy-in that this is a good plan for us to recommend. Because I'm not going to ask you to, do tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then let's vote and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking we've worked really hard all during this process. We've gotten to a plan that we can fund. We think we can
Yes.
fund.
Yep.
And so I'd just like to have your vote that this is a good plan for us to go forward, or from our committee. That's the.
Yeah, I would say it's a wise, very well thought through, resilient approach to dealing with some long-term things in the future, and I'm strongly behind the way it's been done and the way we've come out on it.
We're only talking about
2016,
not beyond that.
Oh, all right.
Because
I
I'd like
think
to
there's
get to
some
that.
work that needs to be done beyond that as far as timing and so forth, and looking at the smoothing and so forth that has to be done.
Before I call for the vote, let me go back. There's a couple issues back. Our island home.
Yeah, let me quickly go through the enterprise funds.
Yes.
The island home is a bit of an elephant in the room right at the moment. We do have an issue with the island home, and that is not really factored in here. They have some retained earnings, and either their retained
Page
earnings.
4.
Page 4. Either their retained earnings are going to be applied to their operating budget, or their capital items, or some combination of both, but
We pay for it in the end.
we're gonna, I think the general fund subsidy may be increasing. Now, Brian and Martin and I had a long meeting with Rachel last week to go over this. There are a couple of things that are happening at the island home that are causing their revenue to be going down, or not, in fact, for fiscal 15, not reaching their projections. It doesn't really affect capital, but just FYI. One of them is the patient mix. There are fewer private pay patients paying the full freight right now, so that's caused a decline in revenue. There's a Medicare billing issue. We haven't been reimbursed what we've been submitting for through some federal, I don't even know what you call it, federal requirements that have changed quite repeatedly. We submit something, oh no, you didn't do this, so you gotta submit it again, oh no, you still didn't do this. I mean, honestly, they make it so difficult that you almost don't even want to bother applying, which is probably the point. In any event, we have to do a little more internal talking about the island home.
So what you were saying was 2015 may require
2015 operating budget
higher
may,
subsidy.
we may need to think about retaining appropriating some of their retained earnings for that, but then we've got nothing or much less for 16's operating budget. So one of the things we've talked about, this will come up at the board meeting tonight probably, is having some discussion about the possibility of an operating override for the island home, which I don't know how controversial that is or isn't going to be, but otherwise we're going to be digging back into the general fund budget to increase the subsidy.
Okay. You're saying 2015 they're going to be over budget?
I think so.
Yeah.
That seems to be our most
Even
recent
2015,
projection.
the retained earnings are not going to make up for the patient mix problem and the reimbursement.
It doesn't really look
How,
like.
what's that number?
Well, that's
Brian?
predictable, but.
I think it's around $500,000 right now, give or take.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. We're still, I mean, it's 20 weeks in, so we're still kind of looking at it, and it's around $500,000. I'm hoping we can kind of wrench it down a little bit better, but that's what the initial pass at it is.
And what was the subsidy before? the 500,000? Usually,
Well, the subsidy-
I think people have in their mind it's 3, but
No, and the subsidy right now in the general fund this year, correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, is 2.295 million.
Yeah.
So,
That's the math I was using, and that's why I wasn't terribly surprised. We've gone through this before. In
Yeah.
other words, I can remember when the subsidy, I forgot which year, was 3.2, and so it has bounced around a little bit, and a lot of it rests right with what you're talking about, and that is is the revenue issue, and their revenue issue, so.
So design for the new facility, OIH/general fund, that's either gonna be some kind of a split, which is not worked into our numbers yet, or not. Or all us or all them once we've got our budget things figured out. But it's possible that we might have to increase our numbers on the general fund side to cover them,
by $1 million
maybe.
You mean as far as the operating budget,
for
No,
2016.
capital?
items. So a possibility might be to increase the real estate proceeds to formula, which I don't love that idea, but we gotta deal with the island home too.
And it is a facility.
It is a facility, exactly. So that,
Well, I guess the question I had and brought it up was because of the impact on the general fund for 2016,
Yeah.
or the capital for 2016. So it may not affect it if we can use the
Well, if you go for an override.
real estate fund.
Or if you go for an override.
It's like a 4-letter word, isn't it? Right.
Well, the problem, you have a problem here, and the question is, if you go for an override, you certainly are going to make sure that everybody understands the problem. So that, and I think in this case, I don't know anybody who says that we ought to shut down our island home, but people have to realize that going forward, this is a heavy cost and a heavy burden that the town has taken on.
yeah.
And so when everybody thinks that everything is easy in the town, this highlights something that we don't have a lot of control about.
Right.
So we have some, but
Yeah, good
not a
point.
lot. So I think the good thing about an override is that it tends to highlight it. Now potentially the bad thing about it is that it might get some people excited too.
Might get people moving.
Well, the one thing about our island home is it certainly what you've described as the problem, the source of the problem, and the lack of control. It certainly resonates with what any consumer understands about our healthcare system. And it's basically you look at the doctor you go to if you're on Medicare and you say they're only paying you $35 for this, and normally it retails for $250, and the doctor sort of says, but I'm not going to shut you out of my practice. I mean, that's really what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the key thing is you can't let that kind of a thing disrupt your longer-term capital plan and say, well, we're going to have to put the school off for another year because something wedged its way in because of bureaucrats in Washington. And I think people can understand that. They can see this is a problem where the money didn't come, the check wasn't in the mail when it was supposed to be.
Peter?
I think, I'm having a little difficulty from a macro view. We as the capital committee are looking at buildings and design and new buildings, whether it be the school or the island home. I think that the micro view that I look as an operator, that's what I do every day. We have spoken about the operating cost of the new school, the new fire station, the island home in its existing site, or the island home in a new site. And I think operationally, that's general fund, but I can't sit here and say I love that or not love that without thinking about the operating expenses. I know darn well you build a new school in a separate building, a separate site. Your operating expense goes up by people power, lights, heat. We're building a bigger fire station. I think we, as a capital committee, should know what is the magnitude of increase in the operating expense once we say good to go, because that's something that we kind of set that example. Then it goes to FinCom, which hopefully has more of a micro view.
Hopefully they do.
And that's where I look at it. I see all these monies capitalized being spent on design, which is, you know, it's up there somewhere in the cloud. Let's design all these buildings, but let's think of what that's going to do once we approve and what it's going to do with our operation. So that's my view.
And that's a very good point. What we're hoping that the board is going to agree to for their next workshop meeting, which is on December 10th, is a further discussion about the fiscal 16 budget, but more of a focus on a 5-year operating forecast. It won't be overly detailed, like per year. It'll have some assumptions.
That comes from the manager, department heads?
Yep,
Okay.
we've been talking to them about it.
All right.
There will be some overall assumptions, like for health insurance, the big categories, retirement, all that stuff. But also, the departments have been asked to give us a kind of a list of the things they see within the next 3 to 5 years that their department is going to be doing or being required to do that they're not doing now, including if they have a new building, what are the additional costs there. Now, in some cases, it may not be a wash, but it might be a little offset by energy efficiency improvements. We're not going to be able to get that down to the penny, obviously, but we want to be able to say, okay, we're going to have a new fire station. It's going to be a little bigger. They don't have a cleaner now. There is a cleaner for this building, so we're probably going to add some cleaning costs to cover them. So maybe that's another 10 grand per year based on whatever the contract is. I'm making that number.
Yeah.
But stuff like that, so that we can see over the next 5 years what we're talking about for operating costs.
Increases.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I mean-
obviously it's going to be increased.
I mean, they're going to be increased. So from an impact on taxpayer,
Libby, is this
You're
a
gonna get
step,
both ways.
is this a step in the direction of having more of a 3 to 5 year operating plan?
Yeah, that's what we're, and I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'm gonna call it so much of a plan at this point as a forecast.
Okay, same.
Because
To me,
things
it's-
change, it's hard to say, you know, we are going to be doing X now, like Linda, for example. She's asked for a new full-time employee for fiscal 16. We're recommending a half-time employee for fiscal 16 because there are so many requests, we just cannot do them all. But that's an important area, and in all likelihood, in 17, depending on how the part-time person works out, all you can ask for an increase from part-time to full-time. And that's just one department. There are several departments that have.
so doesn't FinCom put this whole thing together? Isn't that their, I mean, we're doing the capital but.
Yeah,
but-
well, they
so
certainly
we-
have a lot of discussion about that. I think it's
Yeah.
our staff responsibility to actually put it together
Okay.
and
Yes.
review it with them and discuss it with them and present it. But there should be some endorsing on their part as well as the Board of Selectmen.
But are they angling for a 5-year,
Oh, yes.
like
Yes,
we
they
were angling
both
for
are.
a 10?
Oh, for a long time,
Yeah.
but the issue is you can only, it's a matter of when you're ready.
Right.
And I think what I'm feeling good about is the fact that it sounds like you're getting a little closer to the,
Definitely. I mean, we're really thinking about it now, and have the resources in place. I think.
yeah, and that's great, because it has to start with the Board of Selectmen, actually, in
Yeah,
my
and
view.
the board is
And
been
and
asking
that's,
for it too, and so I think they'll be agreeable.
we've been operating on a 1-year plan for so long,
Right.
and you get bit, every year you get bit in the neck.
Yeah, that's something you've never heard of before.
Yeah, and with a little planning, you wouldn't have, you know, but we're dealing
At least if
year
it's
to
on
year
the
to year to
radar,
year.
you can kind of plan for it.
I'm glad to hear that. Good, that's good news.
Libby, I'm curious, is there any questions we should be, I remember last year we kind of focused on having the 10-year plan put together. Is there any questions we should be asking you or you're hoping for us to vet?
Oh, for the 10-year?
Or just for the 10-year, for, you know, before we go to the FinCom, is there some things that still stand out in your mind?
Well, I
that you
think,
want answers to?
I think not so much necessarily from the committee, unless there are things that you guys have looked at in the 10-year that you think, oh, we're never going to be able to do that, or oh, this sounds quite alarming, or whatever. But I think right now staff is working with the financial advisor, with Cinder, to develop an updated long-term capital financing plan document that I think, hoping we're going to have at least something ready for that FinCom meeting
Okay.
where you're going to be presenting, so that they can see, I mean, the idea of the plan, obviously, to get everything into one document so we can see how we're going to pay for things and what the impact is going to be and all of that. So I think some of that stuff will be covered in this plan.
How are you going to deal with sewers on that? because that doesn't, that's sort of a stepchild.
Sewers are not going to be in there right now. There's going to be the numbers
Understand.
from the CWMP update, but our friends on the sewer planning work group are supposed to be working on financing options and recommendations. Are you on that? You're on that, right? Oh, you're not? Is anybody
Somebody's
here
on.
on that group? No.
I
Anyway,
guess we should get some.
well,
Is Nat on?
I don't think so. Anyway, there's somebody from FinCom, there's somebody from the board. I guess there's nobody from capital program, although all the meetings are open and everything like that. There are, next 6 months, there are already meetings that are in the process of being scheduled with the consultant. Brian's already been working with them on developing some financing options. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, though. It's very detailed, depending on what you want to do. There's betterments. There's, splitting it with the tax rate, increasing the fees.
Yeah.
Sewer
Okay,
connections,
here's
things
where I
like
was
that.
coming from. We can have, it sounds like you can have something ready for the general fund for the meeting. To me, if that's all we talk about, we're misleading a little bit, because
Yeah.
the boulder in the road, in my view, sits over here. Now, we may not have any answers, but we certainly need to say the boulder in the road is here, and we don't have that yet.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sure we will say that.
Because-
it'll come up whether we bring it up or not. I think
Yeah,
we want to
well,
bring it up.
I think we should be in a position of bringing it up rather than being asked the question,
Yeah, I think it'll be
personally.
worked into the presentation. I think Phil and Brian and
I'm
Brian.
supposed to get
Martin-
together with Brian at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the plan with Cinder is really to take whatever this committee recommends for 16 and how you guys foresee 17 looking, okay? Modeling that to give a breakdown on the impact per 100,000 on the tax rate, okay? And then I'm also going to have it broken out by the two major projects, okay? Because I think those will be the most important. The sewers impact on the tax rates over that period is a little difficult to really project at this time, because there's, I think, 9 individual areas, correct me if I'm wrong, that may or may not be done. And I have no idea what order they're going to be in. And I have no idea what the direction of any of the other groups that are working on it in terms of how they want to finance it, betterments, tax rates, sewer bill, whatever.
I understand.
So the plan is that once I start formulating a better understanding of how everybody's heading with that part of it, is to then rework the plan that we originally presented on the 17th to the FinCom with those assumptions into it. But for the 17th, I will not be able to do that.
Yeah. But I was assuming that.
Okay.
Because there's so much that hasn't been tied down on that. But people we need to somehow make sure that people understand that's sitting there, because when you do bring that up, the last thing you want to do is surprise everybody, because that'll be an interesting
Well, there's one obvious one that seems to be a consensus, and that's Nantucket. That's the one thing that I think is going to have to be done.
I have a question. Libby, have the consultants said to you, this is what we have to do? What is the state mandating that we do? That's what I'm curious. I hear about.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think they have, and I think it's all in the update, but picking out those things right now, I don't know if they are.
That's key.
That's what's really key to me, because I think my view on the sewers is it's really important for water quality, especially our estuaries. There's a lot of other things we can do with fertilizers and whatnot.
Katsui Spring is one.
Katsui Springs is one. And my, me in my 30 miles in the sky goes, why not spend, $230 million on something that might have a totally different impact on another aspect of the environment that could have a lot greater impact nationally or globally? And just think about sewers. Well, you could spend all this money and get great sewers, and then what have you really done to promote a cause nationally?
Increased operating
Well,
expenses.
I'm with you, Toby. I think the problem is that the potential is for a big boulder in the road. Is it? My instincts say that it may not be quite as bad as we think, because I'm with you. You do what you have to do, number one. What is that? Well, we got to nail that down. There are other things that can be done from a water quality point of view that, in my view, we're not doing, that we need to get on with, that don't cost money.
Or less.
But the problem is we don't have the answers to any of these.
Right.
And so it's sitting, we've got a big cloud sitting there,
But I think with this problem, you have $230 million that you're gonna potentially have to deal with a large portion of it or not. And a not large portion of it might be $100 million. That might be a very small portion, that would be great, hypothetically. And so the way I see it is, what are we doing, back to what Peter was saying, we see the capital aspects of it, but we're not kind of looking at the operating aspects of it. And I see it in the reverse scenario with sewer. What can we be spending in operating to deal with this large expenditures to offset our operating costs?
I agree.
And that's what the conversation needs to get
Right.
to.
What should we be spending this year? Does it take $1 million or $2 million this year to put together a program, to bring in some amazing consultant, to have some beautiful parade, like a sewer parade or something, out of this world, to get people to manage their fertilizers better, to clean out their septics? Those things could save us a lot of money. And if we put them in our operating, that might help to get them there.
I kind of look at it as what problem is there that the only solution for it is a sewer?
Right.
And if we look at it from that point of view, then you say, okay, well, the only solution for that particular situation is a sewer.
We got a
What-
budget for it.
What, yeah,
This
we
is what
can
Tony's
work
getting
on
at,
that,
has
but what
to
do
be.
we do, what are the other things that we need to do to preclude that there are multiple solutions to,
Right.
POPAs, and multiple solutions to Monomoy, and multiple solutions
So-
different than sewer.
So what I want to get, so when you look at that, you have to say, okay, what's going on at the state and federal levels of the Clean Water Act to enable, that drives this happening? A couple of weeks ago, there's been some lawsuits of the EPA deciding whether or not the EPA is enforcing the Clean Water Act effectively on sewers. I don't know if you guys have read any of this. But we need to think, I think when we get to that point of what do we have to do, you have to think of why we're being asked to do certain things. And it has to do with the greater, with the state and the federal government mandating what we need to do. And so the way I think about that is what does the state and federal government really know about what we need to do here on Nantucket? What are our priorities for water quality? It's not like we have to do it. It's what is the most important thing to do? So what do you guys think? What's the most important thing?
Who's next? I think maybe Peter.
Do I remember correctly that Nat raised a really serious question about the long-term approach to dealing with this, where he said that, and I'm asking, do I remember correctly? I recall him saying that sewering, everything that we're talking about sewering, is not necessarily going to prove to be the most cost-effective way of dealing with the problem in lots of different parts of the island.
Yeah.
Or even the most effective.
Well, I think most people understand that.
And if we know that, we do have to revert to this position of what is it that we have to do. The only solution is a sewer for this particular place, and then you take it incrementally. And then there's this other set of moving parts, which is all of the federal mandates, which are going to be possibly changing all this. It's like when the price of solar panels went down, so much, suddenly all sorts of things change. So you don't want to commit to a brittle plan going forward for 20 years and spending $200 million, and it's only sewers. And so I'm strongly in favor of just what do we have to do is the only solution, and budget for that.
Yeah. Libby, I know your thing, but I have a question.
Yeah.
The last time I spent any amount of time reading this material, I think the issue we were dealing with on the sewering was in when is the shoe going to drop? When is the state going to come in and tell us what we have to do? And at some point in time, I'm talking maybe a couple of years ago, because we'd made progress, and they included mining, by the way, as part of that progress, because we have done certain things, as long as we continue to do certain things, they're not gonna have a heavy hand in telling us what we have to do.
Yeah, that's my understanding, number one. And number two, there are no current, today, state regulations that require really any of this. There are regulations that reference the total daily managed load, whatever.
DLs, yeah.
There are, how can I phrase this? There are TMDL numbers that they would like you to meet. We are over those numbers in some areas, but not by very much at all. It's in some cases, it's very insignificant. And since we have done a number of things, they're not, I can't see the state coming after us or anything. We're already so far ahead of so many other towns that, and we're very actively doing a lot of things. The jetties is going to
The
start.
jetty's gonna be a big one,
That's gonna be a big one,
That's gonna be a
potentially.
big help.
So I don't really see that as being a reason to necessarily do things. It's a reason, but it shouldn't be the reason.
I think, and this is really the task for the sewer planning work group, and it's hard, I'm asking you, but I know it's for them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the way I see it is, I don't, when you ask that question, what do you have to do? If you're $230 million for sewer, what do you have to do? Well, we don't necessarily have to do anything really. But what we should think about is what we want to do. What should we be doing? We need to be proactive in preserving
That's right.
the water quality.
Yep.
And so then the question comes, what is the most important thing that we need to do? And for me, it jumps out at me. We need to spend money in our operating budget to educate people about how to use fertilizers, how to use their toilets, get some alternatives in, because that's where we can get the biggest bang for our buck.
Well, on the fertilizer issue, I still think you're gonna have a regulation, period.
Yeah. And
I don't see how we can avoid it.
And there may be
We've
some-
tried the soft sell with
Yeah.
that group, and it doesn't seem to be working very well, so.
There's no regulation about using your septic tank either, whether it's
Yeah.
overflowing, nobody, if it keeps on overflowing.
This is all in the update.
Green, a
There's
lot of green
septic
grass.
Management plan in there.
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
So people need to go through it and prioritize all of the
Soft
semi or
solution.
non-cost options.
I call them soft solutions.
That's good.
Just a question on the presentation that the consultant made at that workshop. Did I understand her correctly that there is a state fund that would finance the project, the $55 million project?
It will not finance the project, but it's a loan program.
loan,
It's a
zero
low
interest.
interest
Yeah, she was
loan
very-
program.
0%?
I don't think it's zero. It's,
No,
there are some things that are zero, some things that are one, and some things that are two. And we just recently qualified for something like 5 projects already for the loan interest loan. I'm not sure if any of them are zero or not. But anyway, yes, so we're taking advantage of that.
but that's just a loan.
Now, let's go
Yeah,
back
that's
Still have to fund it.
to the issue. Is our island home going to impact our recommendations for 2016? Yeah. If it's an operating override, I guess it doesn't, but then there is the operating override.
And if it fails, then, I think we're gonna have to, just to get down to business here, we're gonna have to put $1 million in the general fund for the design.
Yeah, I thought we had that in there.
Well, it's here, but it's not in those
It's
numbers
not gonna,
that
the
are
numbers we
funded
just looked at.
At
by
the
the
bottom.
$6.9 million. It's
Okay.
in other words, if you put another million in, it would be $7,425,000 as opposed to $6
Well,
million.
I must have missed that. I thought that was in there.
I mean, we'll figure out how to do it, but the thing is that we'll
Because it's amortized.
because of authorizations, because here's the thing. We'll probably,
That's another way of funding it.
That's fine.
we'll probably
Okay,
build
then-
it in
then
5 years.
That
So I
that was in something.
we could do
Where the hell is it?
until, up until that point, and to figure it out,
Well,
to make the impact minimal. So there's some ways to do
There's
it.
a big question on this. There is $1 million in there.
Oh, we should just borrow it, just say that we're gonna have to borrow.
No,
it.
Okay,
Right here.
I mean,
so,
we'll have to look at it.
There's $1 million in there.
Ways to, some metrics to do this.
all right,
but
well,
I
what
mean,
Brian and I are saying is, discussing is, how about if we add in the island home to the general fund side. But it won't necessarily change our, we can still get to zero, because what we'll do with the million for the Island Home is borrow it.
I see
That will
what
be
you-
the only
yeah,
project that will be
gotcha.
borrowed,
Took my minute.
and the debt
Okay.
service will either
Gotcha.
be paid out of the hopeful override, or the general fund operating budget, or the Island Homes operating budget, which,
Yeah.
who knows? But we
Yeah.
won't be actually borrowing till well into 16 anyway, so there may not even be necessarily a repayment in 16, or a payment.
Okay.
Now, the question I have specifically then is, right now we've got, if you look at their plan, they've got $1 million to do the design, and they've got 17 million for a new building, correct? Now, the issue is are these problems you're talking about, are they going to have any effect on timing?
Timing of,
Well, you've got it in 2017 to build it, and that's the big nut.
yeah,
Should, is it,
well, the problems that they're having now aren't going to have anything to do with the timing.
okay,
No.
okay, I didn't think so.
Building the thing in 17, depending on when we get a designer, or when they're done with all that, that might need to get pushed into 18, but it is programmed in for 17 right now.
Yeah, and that's why I was bringing it up, because, you know, when we look at the longer haul,
Yeah.
where you put it, I think can make a fairly significant difference when, you know, when you look at that's a smoothing issue, because right now we've got everything in 16 and 17, and then you get beyond that, and it really drops off. And but the problem is that we have to pay for those 2 high years, depending on the smoothing and everything.
Well, the
Yeah.
So
smoothing
I'm
technique.
just saying, is that realistic to say that we're going to build it in 17?
I don't know if we.
Well, even if we built it in 17, I mean, the smoothing technique is essentially going to be this, even for the two, you know, we'll use the school and the fire department as the examples, okay? The smoothing technique is basically going to try to estimate when construction would be done, okay? And then we would have to permanently borrow the money. So we're going to use bond anticipation notes for short term, which would really have no impact on the tax rate, because we have money in the operating budget already to cover short-term interest, which is what a band would be, the only thing we would pay on the band, okay? So the reality is, if we approve the school tomorrow, or the fire station tomorrow, the actual impact to the tax rate is not going to be for 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road until we actually
Right.
permanently borrow and the project's completed. So that's how I'm going to smooth this out. I'm going to try to estimate when the projects are going to be completed
Good.
and push those out to the
Okay.
year that way. So that's how I'm smoothing this all the way out.
Well, to use Bruce's thing, which he will definitely bring up at some point, is that we've got debt running off, okay, and so that kind of should help on the tax impact as you smooth and all that.
I would assume you will have some type of a listing of how that's smooth, you know, the assumptions that go into the smoothing.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be key,
Absolutely.
you know, because, and so it's kind of, like you say, it's kind of irrelevant when we authorize it, but the key is, when do we do it?
When's it actually going to hit the tax
Yep,
rate is the
yep,
biggest question.
Right, and we presented very much the worst case last year.
Okay.
We
But-
presented a worst case here too, which is
Yeah, I was
we
gonna say.
permanently borrowed it the day we approved it. So.
I was going to say.
So we get to drive the car off the lot, and the dealer says, you're going to get the bill
Yeah.
18 months from now, so
Yeah.
start planning on it.
Yes.
Okay. I like that.
Something like that.
Maybe quick question, how long have we been subsidizing the
Good.
Island Home? How many years?
Since the beginning of the Island.
Okay, just wanted to,
It's always,
Always.
Operational.
it's never been for itself.
Right.
yeah.
Excuse me.
And if revenue keeps going down, there's a lot of people going to say.
But how many years is that? I'm young, I'm sorry. How have we been around longer than that?
Well, it's,
Twenty?
predates me, so, I don't know, 30, 40.
Wow.
Now, obviously, back in
The day it wasn't as
the day,
expensive.
it wasn't anywhere close to what it is now.
Well before we got into the Byzantine health
That's right.
financing system that we have today. Naturally, that's really the story.
Before we leave sewers, I just have one last thing on that, and that is, I understand the problem we have with the sewer group. It doesn't seem to be doing a lot. Maybe they just started again, but they haven't up till now. And you hate to sit here and say, and I'm thinking capital, I'm just thinking of us trying to get our arms around long-term capital and saying, you know, somehow we have to get off dead center on that and get moving. And I'm not quite sure, I have some ideas, but I don't think that's germane at the moment, but somehow we've got to get off dead center and on that and get moving, simply because we just don't know at this point. The biggest, if that group can get together, the biggest thing they could do is to come up with a recommendation on financing.
Yes.
In my view.
I believe, and you're more than welcome to attend this. They are having a meeting on Monday.
What time would it is that? I can
I
look
don't
up
know
the numbers.
what time
Okay,
I'm
Monday,
meeting with the consultant.
no, I've got so much
it's
going
at.
on.
Maybe 3.
I think it might be 3, because I'm meeting with the consultants at 1 o'clock to start to kind of formalize and finalize what this financing spreadsheet should be looking like and how it should be calculating and doing that also. And then I believe that I'm going to the meeting because I think financing options are going to starting to be discussed. So I think we are working towards it.
It'll be a little tricky because you have a FinCom public hearing.
I know. I just noticed that.
Yeah. Who's the FinCom person again?
Pardon?
Who's the FinCom person on the sewer group? Is it?
It was Tim Savarino, but now I don't know who the new one is.
Did they vote on that?
Yeah, we voted on that. I just
Yeah,
can't remember.
Is it Joe?
Kraus?
Maybe? Sewer planning worker?
Could be Joe.
Anyway, we'll figure out, but I don't know, he might be late for the public hearing. Your public hearing.
Okay.
If this meeting starts at 3, which we're thinking.
I think it does.
Yeah. To me, that is something as a group. I don't know if there's anything we can do from a point of view of influence, but we need to. I think one of the things that needs to be done is we got to get off dead center on this.
Yeah, I think.
It's just sitting there,
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir.
I've been looking at it for not as long as you have, but a long time,
Yeah.
many years, and there's no progress really on that as far as what are we going to do?
Yeah,
It just gets you.
Maybe it's almost 9:30.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm thinking that I think we've got all the issues out on the table. I think probably it's time for someone to make a motion to
Joe Ross.
approve this recommendation. So,
Good.
I'll second. I just want to make sure I know what we're voting on.
okay.
To approve the total funding of like 6.425.
But I think you're
These
gonna add
items for
to-
2016.
I think you're gonna add $1 million to that. But
Yeah.
the bottom, but the funding will still remain
Right,
zero with the
right.
bottom, and we'll
Yeah.
fund the debt service through other.
That's
You're just going to take more out of one, that's all.
right. So the 1 million is going to move into the
Yes,
I'm gonna work it in.
page 3 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's smart.
But just to be clear, like we're funding,
Pages 1, 2, 1 and 2 plus $1 million.
yeah.
Plus $1 million.
but some of this stuff gets borrowed for, like the.
Well, the 2
boulevard-
that do are the fires, well, the 3 that do. The fire station, the school, and the island home.
Okay. So it's just-
1 million, Brian.
Right. I'm not quite, I may have missed something maybe at the beginning. So are we funding like the boulevard reconstruction? Or-
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
funding all of that.
Yep.
And none of it is going to be borrowed
Right. So
on, except for the island home, the school, and the
Right.
fire station.
Okay, so we're funding everything. The DPW is 6.8 million. You know, when you add it,
When we take out Consu,
okay.
It goes down.
but I can see the
Yeah.
confusion because I
It's
did.
You left it in there, but you didn't leave it in there.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I'll take it out when I redo this. I'll send it around.
Oh, I
I
see,
think
I
so.
see. It's the subtotals wrong. I got it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure that out, too.
Okay,
Like
cool.
I said, wait a minute, how could it be
Never
6.8 million if the total's only 6.8 million?
The numbers are close enough that I can vote.
No, I think they actually do add up when you take Consu out of there.
And I assume we'll get a cleaned up version.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Good. Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, committee, very much. Are we meeting next week?
You got
You,
it.
maybe next week.
We ought to prep for
Yeah, when is your FinCom appearance? Is it-
17th, if my
Yeah.
recollection is
Yeah,
correct.
it is.
I think it's the 18th.
18. I thought it
17th,
was
you have a last meeting for the year.
If
Okay.
you need it, that was
If
if
we
you
need
need
it,
it,
okay.
kind of thing. Maybe next week what you should do is you'll have this updated
It'll all be clean.
thing, all be cleaned up.
And we might have some model back? No.
I will do my best, absolutely.
All right, well, maybe you and I can meet, we're going to try to meet tomorrow.
I'm
sometime.
Friday, because Cinder's actually traveling today and tomorrow.
Okay,
So.
so it may be short notice, but it'd be really.
No, they have everything built right now, so basically it's just sending her a list and saying, here's what we're gonna do. Let's put this is what we're borrowing, put it in, and then let's talk about how to smooth it out.
So let's definitely meet
But the
next
smoothing is
week.
going to take some time,
And you
and
can
that's
talk
why.
about your.
Yeah,
presentation.
I mean, it shouldn't take a lot of time, because we should be able to we can look at it and figure out, I mean,
Okay.
police station's probably gonna take 2 years to build, I would imagine. From start to finish, a school's probably gonna take 3, 4, probably.
Usually you have some kind of a report,
Yes.
and that always seems sometimes a little bit cumbersome because everybody's supposed to contribute something, and then there's always the stragglers that do. So maybe your report, if I might make a little tiny suggestion, is either a narrative that you Phil write up, or this sheet. And I can change the title a little bit. I'm already going to change the title to say it's Town Admin and Recs, but maybe it's Town Admin and Capcom Recs.
Or just Capcom,
Yeah, or however you
and it
want.
could be yours too.
And I can do
I guess
Capcom.
I guess what I'm wondering is whether we need to do, and I'll throw this out to the committee. What we have done in the past is we've taken each individual item and justified why we're recommending it. And I'm wondering whether we still need to do that.
Let
Or
me
do
make
you
a
think that
suggestion.
makes, or
We don't have to do an atomistic approach like we did last year, where we just kind of, deal the deck out, everybody takes a couple of cards and
Right.
goes home. But I think, speaking for myself, there are 2 areas where I feel that I have enough familiarity to draft some text and email it to you and say, I can cover the fire station, and I can cover, I think, most of what I think we want to say about the school, and just send you some text and say, do what you will with it. And then, maybe others can volunteer to cover parts of it.
So what you're saying there is we think it would be a good idea to have a report with some documentation behind
With
it.
some, narrative. As much narrative as we're capable of individually contributing to your
I think
coordinating effort.
you might want to have it on the big items.
The big ones, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Because I don't know that every little one,
Yeah,
I mean,
replacing desktops, it's a sentence.
yeah, I
They can
I
see.
can't speak for, I cannot speak for FinCom, but I don't think they're going to want to know. I'm the detail guy there. If I'm not,
If you're not going to ask anything.
if I'm not going to ask it, probably most of anybody isn't going to. So, and I don't see it because most of the other stuff is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
They'll say, "Do you need it?" Yes. Okay. But
Maybe it suffices that you have all the backup
Yeah,
of the actual requests. If
With the
people want to
request.
look at it,
Yeah.
it's going to be online, and
yeah,
each request.
Yeah, you can have a new, here's all the things we requested of, and here's what we ended up with, and
Martin, maybe what you and I, and maybe you, Brian, can talk about later is what requests to put online, because we're not going to put the ones that we're not doing.
okay, so I've put
So-
everything there, so I can go and remove the ones.
That
Or
would be
we
the
can
report.
change it into a new document.
This-
Leave it, I guess. it's all
pages,
wrong.
basically.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll figure it out.
the big,
That's what's all that was submitted,
Peter
but I
could put
guess-
something together on the big item.
I
You
think
know
that's
what I mean?
If they wanna go with
Because they're going to.
Well, I'm gonna.
That this Peter could do
once
school, and
document
this
is
Peter
completed,
could do
I'll
fire
also- the
station.
one we have there is covered.
I think that's a good idea.
So
Very
whatever
good.
is submitted,
Peter
I'll
Fear.
post it up, also take it, capital place, so there's-
Peter Square.
Fantastic, and then I'll try to build a whole.
Yeah, okay, so I'll finish this up today, or.
That's a
Do it in Word. And
I think that's
change the
fine
font.
because those are the biggies.
It'll be
Those are the
same
ones that are going to
numbers.
attract attention anyway.
Can we go to highlight Ireland?
Okay,
So I'll just change the
Yeah,
title,
well,
okay, all right, good.
and that's what you posted on for them.
Okay.
yeah, I don't
No.
think so.
Well, he's going to fix 1 million.
I like the idea of putting Ireland home in the general fund.
Bringing it back.
Well, that was,
It was
who was that selectman that made it put it out there in the other group? I can't remember his name. Because it never, no. Michael Copco, I think. He was the one who wanted it to be a
Yeah.
general, it used to be general fund, then it became an enterprise fund, and now made it confusing, basically.
Look, one other question. On the, just as far as funding the enterprises go, the solid waste, the mining, and the sewer, there are, $8.8 million in modifications. How do we plan on funding those things?
Well, the sewer items are all going to be funded in the sewer enterprise fund. And one of our next things to do, but it keeps getting replaced with other things, is to do a rate projection. Because we're going to need to probably increase the rates at least a little.
A little?
Although there is a decent amount of retained earnings for sewer enterprise.
So that'll come out of rates.
Yep, and solid waste, the mining,
Yep.
it says gentleman has already worked into the
Right,
operating budget.
Yeah.
And then the additional line cell engineering.
That'll just come out of the solid waste enterprise
Oh,
fund.
okay. And then the other question I have is Wanacomment is going to come out of water rates, administration facilities.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked him that question per se.
All right. Cool.
We're good?
So we are meeting next.
We are next, yeah, let's see
I think
how
it would
far
be-
we've gotten.
I think it would be nice just to kind of, I think
Yeah.
we've had a
Yeah.
lot of great discussions and kind of figure out what to, it would be nice to lend our expertise to the betterment of some of these issues we've discussed over the years.
And we also have yet to go over that, those trade-offs that we talked about wanting to deal with, kind of, what are the key trade-offs? You remember that thing that
Oh, yeah.
I said,
If you don't-
if I brought the issue up, I was in charge of it. Well, it's been floating around there. If we have some spare time, it's not an urgent issue, but it would be
I know
nice to
between
get
now
some
and next
clarity.
Wednesday, there's a lot going on. I've got things with the Community Foundation. We're doing our retreats Sunday and Monday.
So it can be a brief thing, but we'll get to it eventually.
So I've got a lot going on. This particular time of year, not always.
Oh, no, that's right. This time of year is awful.
Time of year is awful.
I have a question here. Are you going to guys do an executive summary like you did last year?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got
Before
that.
December 18th?
Yes, we have definitely. I'm hoping maybe I'll have a little bit put together. That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. I'd like to have a lot put together for next Wednesday. I'm thinking, what have I got to do besides this? I got a few things.
Martin,
Get
can
it
you
for
do
me.
one thing for me too?
Yeah.
In the enterprise funds, just for future reference, it's always been a little tricky for me looking at the airport. You don't see like what proportion that total would be for the town, and I was wondering if we could just have another line item. Because most of these things are paid for by grants.
The town, it's going to come out of their enterprise fund. not
So it'll
from the
come-
town.
okay,
Yeah,
so it'll all-
they're an enterprise fund, so it's the same as with the sewer. It's going to come from them.
Okay. And then we deal with the subsidy later.
There's no subsidy for the
There is no subsidy for the airport budget for 16.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Is that,
Then there's, yeah.
do you have
They're trying
that,
hard.
is that agreement nailed down, or?
It's in the it's not 100% nailed down, but I got to draft the term sheet so that he can make sure that what I
Okay.
put down is right, and then I have to sit down and go through it with the town
Right.
manager, and then get the
Is it a
select.
user's rate we're charging them?
Huh?
Never.
I suspect it's.
I want him to pay back tomorrow, but they're
You'd like them just to pay back the principal, would you? You'd be very happy with that, I'm sure.
wish they'd pay me all back tomorrow, but that's not going to happen. So
No. We know that.
Committee has done a great job. Thank you. We're not done yet, but so far so good.
Well, just ask a guideline. Each of us is going to write something about the big ticket items. Do you want that to be maybe like a page, one-page narrative, two-page narrative, half-page, or what are you looking for?
As small as you can make it.
Okay, all right.
And still get
Get the point across,
Yeah, okay.
Don't leave things out just because you're
Right.
trying to shorten it, but,
Brief.
just control yourself, that's all.
I'll do my best. I'll do it. But I will give it to you in words so you can make any necessary.
Happy stroll, everybody. I move for adjournment.
I don't want to. I think you have a general idea of what I'm.
Yeah, I think I do.
But
This is a lot easier than
Toby, you're going to get a call from some of the Worcester Polytech students who want to chat briefly just to get some perspective on the coastal erosion issue.
Thank you.
About the what?
Great.
I mean, I know you're a busy guy, and I had said they should give you a call. Take a time that's good for you. I said, I know you have office hours, but then the question was, you maybe are real busy with people coming in. You don't want to be bothered with students at that time, but pick a time that works for you. And
They've got to sit down
I
and
think
say, here's the deal.
they'll benefit from meeting you, and you'll benefit from getting to know them as well. We got a really smart group of students this year.
Yeah, just give them.
Okay.
But don't wait for them to come up.
Yep.
Don't see them.
That's right. We're not getting anywhere.
What is your son doing in New York?
He's a lawyer,
Boy's a lawyer.
criminal attorney.
What kind of
He's actually, he's moving into, he's getting out of that, by and large, he's moving into the real estate, it's security business. He and a friend of his, put together, they're developing a security business. His friend was his retired captain of the New York City Police Force. So John is the business part, he's the technical. So they're putting together, they are growing a security business, and it's security consulting. But it also is they do security work as well.
Someone in law enforcement, that's the partner you want to have.
Yeah, that's right. So he's got that. So he's really almost doing nothing legal. Right.
Law is a tough field to be in. Big oversupply of legal talent.
Yeah.
Well, I should say in the United States.
And the problem you have with the criminal attorney, which is he was an excellent criminal attorney, is that it's not you don't it's collection. You don't always get paid. Yeah, for sure. If you spend a lot of time, defending someone, and they are convicted, your chances, if you don't have the money up front,
I'm behind bars, and so are you.
Yeah, and even he said that if you don't get it, even the ones you get off will stiff you. So you got to get it up front. Well, that's a problem because people will resist that, and so